I did that on purpose, Fezzik said then, picking up another rock, holding it ready. I didn't have to, miss. I believe you, the man in black said. They stood facing each other on the narrow mountain path. Now what happens? Asked the man in black. We face each other as God intended, Fezzik said. No tricks, no weapons, skill against skill alone. You mean you'll put down your rock, and I'll put down my sword, and we'll try to kill each other like civilized people, is that it? If you'd rather, I can kill you now, Fezzik said gently, and he raised the rock to throw. I'm giving you a chance. So you are, and I accept it, said the man in black, and he began to take off his sword and scabbard. Although, frankly, I think the odds are slightly in your favor at hand fighting. I tell you what I tell everybody, Fezzik explained. I cannot help being the biggest and strongest. It's not my fault. I'm not blaming you, said the man in black. Let's get to it then, Fezzik said, and he dropped his rock and got into fighting position, watching as the man in black slowly moved toward him. For a moment Fezzik felt almost wistful. This was clearly a good fellow, even if he had killed an ego. He didn't complain or try and beg or bribe. He just accepted his fate. No complaining, nothing like that. Obviously a criminal of character. Was he a criminal, though? Fezzik wondered. Surely the mask would indicate that. Or was it worse than that? Was he disfigured? His face burned away by acid, perhaps? Or perhaps born hideous? Why do you wear a mask and hood? Fezzik asked. I think everybody will in the near future, was the man in black's reply. They're terribly comfortable. They faced each other on the mountain path. There was a moment's pause. Then they engaged. Fezzik let the man in black fiddle around for a bit, tested the man's strength, which was considerable for someone who wasn't a giant. He let the man in black feint and dodge and try a hold here, a hold there. Then, when he was quite sure the man in black would not go to his maker embarrassed, Fezzik locked his arms tight around. Fezzik lifted, and squeezed, and squeezed. Then he took the remains of the man in black, snapped him one way, snapped him the other, cracked him with one hand in the neck, with the other at the spine base, locked his legs up, rolled his limp arms around them, and tossed the entire bundle of what had once been human into a nearby crevice. That was the theory, anyway. In fact, what happened was this. Fezzik lifted and squeezed, and the man in black slipped free. Thought Fezzik. That certainly was a surprise. I thought for sure I had him. You're very quick, Fezzik complimented. And a good thing, too, said the man in black. Then they engaged again. This time Fezzik did not give the man in black a chance to fiddle. He just grabbed him, swung him around his head once, twice, smashed his skull against the nearest boulder, pounded him, pummeled him, gave him a final squeeze for good measure, and tossed the remains of what once had been alive into a nearby crevice. Those were his intentions, anyway. In actuality, he never even got through the grabbing part with much success, because no sooner had Fezzik's great hands reached out than the man in black dropped and spun and twisted and was loose and free and still quite alive. I don't understand a thing that's happening, Fezzik thought. Could I be losing my strength? Could there be a mountain disease that takes your strength? There was a desert disease that took my parents' strength. That must be it. I must have caught a plague. But if that is it, why isn't he weak? No, I must still be strong. It has to be something else. Now, what could it be? Suddenly he knew. He had not fought against one man in so long he had all but forgotten how. He had been fighting groups and gangs and bunches for so many years that the idea of having but a single opponent was slow in making itself known to him. Because you fought them entirely different. When there were 12 against you, you made certain moves, tried certain holds, acted in certain ways. When there was but one, you had to completely readjust yourself. Quickly now, Fezzik went back through time. How had he fought the champion of Sandiki? He flashed through that fight in his mind, then reminded himself of all the other victories against other champions, the men from Ispir and Simal and Bolu and Zyle. He remembered fleeing Constantinople because he had beaten their champions so quickly, so easily, Yes, Fezzik thought, of course. And suddenly he readjusted his style to what it once had been. But by that time the man in black had him by the throat. The man in black was riding him, and his arms were locked across Fezzik's windpipe, one in front, one behind. Fezzik reached back, but the man in black was hard to grasp. Fezzik could not get his arms around to his back and dislodge the enemy. Fezzik ran at a boulder, and at the last moment spun around so that the man in black received the main force of the charge. It was a terrible jolt. Fezzik knew it. But the grip on his windpipe grew ever tighter. Fezzik charged the boulder again spun, and again he knew the power of the blow the man in black had taken. But still the grip remained. Fezzik clawed at the man in black's arms. He pounded his giant fists against them, but now he had no air. Fezzik continued to struggle. He could feel a hollowness in his legs now. He could see the world beginning to pale. But he did not give up. He was the mighty Fezzik, lover of rhymes, and you did not give up, no matter what. Now the hollowness was in his arms, and the world was snowing. Fezzik went to his knees. He pounded still, but feebly. He fought still, but his blows would not have harmed a child. No air. There was no more air. There was no more anything. Not for Fezzik. Not in this world. I am beaten. I am going to die, he thought, just before he fell onto the mountain path. He was only half wrong. There is an instant between unconsciousness and death, and as the giant pitched onto the rocky path, that instant happened. And just before it happened, the man in black let go. He staggered to his feet and leaned against a boulder until he could walk. Fezzik lay sprawled, faintly breathing. The man in black looked around for a rope to secure the giant, gave up the search almost as soon as he'd begun. What good were ropes against strength like this? He would simply snap them. The man in black made his way back to where he'd dropped his sword. He put it back on. 2 down, and the hardest one to go. The whole backstory with Fezzik really gives you kind of who he is as a character. But I feel like they captured that in the movie without the backstory. Like they captured that sort of childlikeness. But I guess it's possible that they were able to convey that because of the way it was written in the book. But you don't have the visuals that a movie has when you're reading a book. So you have to give a little bit different context in order to get that across, either to your reader or to an actor who's going to be playing the character, or to the set designer or the costume designer, or just everybody who goes into making a visual story come to life. So I really like that, but I really like the way that a book gives you a glimpse into a character's mindset of how he goes back in time and he thinks about all the things he's learned, and he thinks about his parents, and he's like, I'm gonna die, and that whole mental part of it doesn't really come through in the movie. So I don't know, there's different ways. I guess there are certain ways to convey that from a movie perspective, but they didn't go that route in the movie, which is you can only spend so much time on a scene. But I did like the sort of, I guess, mental but visual choreography that happened of both in the sword fight with Inigo Montoya, but also with Fezzik. There was a lot of really good visual stuff, so you could really picture how it was playing out. Which maybe I'm biased because I have seen the choreography from the movie, but I think that it is very visual description, and I really like that. So I like Fezzik. I like the way he rhymes things. That's a really good like character quirk. And I do like that all of these characters do have like their individual thing that makes them them. It makes it easier to read it out loud because then I can sort of have different voices and stuff that, or at least I'm hoping for different voices. I'm hoping it works, but it does make it a little easier to read out loud. Vizzini was waiting for him. Indeed, he had set out a little picnic spread. From the knapsack that he always carried, he had taken a small handkerchief, and on it he had placed 2 wine goblets. In the center was a small leather wine holder, and beside it some cheese and some apples. The spot could not have been lovelier. A high point of the mountain path, with a splendid view all the way back to Florence Channel. Buttercup lay helpless beside the picnic, gagged and tied and blindfolded. Vizzini held his long knife against her white throat. "Welcome," Vizzini called when the man in black was almost upon them. The man in black stopped and surveyed the situation. "You've beaten my Turk," Vizzini said. "It would seem so." "And now it is down to you, and it is down to me." "So that would seem too," the man in black said, edging just a half step closer to the hunchback's long knife. With a smile, the hunchback pushed the knife harder against Buttercup's throat. It was about to bring blood. "If you wish her dead, by all means keep moving," Vizzini said. The man in black froze. "Better," Vizzini nodded. No sound now beneath the moonlight. Interesting. This happens at night, where in the movie it was broad daylight. Which I guess makes more sense, kind of. Because the moon comes out when when she's in the water, and so it's obviously nighttime there. And then they take some time to climb the cliffs, and then they take some time to go into the mountains. So yeah, it would probably be like very early in the morning, before the sun rises. Yeah. "I understand completely what you are trying to do," the Sicilian said finally, "and I want it quite clear that I resent your behavior. You are trying to kidnap what I have rightfully stolen, and I think it quite ungentlemanly." "Let me explain," the man in black began, starting to edge forward. "You're killing her!" the Sicilian screamed, shoving harder with the knife. A drop of blood appeared now at Buttercup's throat, red against white. The man in black retreated. "Let me explain," he said again, but from a distance. Again the hunchback interrupted. "There is nothing you can tell me I do not already know. I have not had the schooling equal to some, but for knowledge outside of books, there is no one in the world close to me. People say I read minds, but that is not, in all honesty, true. I merely predict the truth using logic and wisdom, and I say, you are a kidnapper. Admit it." "I will admit that as a ransom item she has value, nothing more. I have been instructed to do certain things to her. It is very important that I follow my instructions. If I do this properly, I will be in demand for life, and my instructions do not include ransom, they include death. So your explanations are meaningless. We cannot do business together. You wish to keep her alive for ransom, whereas it is terribly important to me that she stop breathing in the very near future. Has it occurred to you that I have gone to great effort and expense, as well as personal sacrifice, to reach this point?" the man in black replied, "and that if I fail now, I might get very angry, and if she stops breathing in the very near future, it is entirely possible that you will catch the same fatal illness." "I have no doubt you could kill me. Any man who can get by Inigo and Fezzik would have no trouble disposing of me. However, has it occurred to you that if you did that, then neither of us would get what we want, you having lost your ransom item, me my life?" "We are at an impasse, then," said the man in black. "I fear so," said the Sicilian. "I cannot compete with you physically, and you are no match for my brains." "You are that smart?" "There are no words to contain all my wisdom. I am so cunning, crafty, and clever, so filled with deceit, guile, and chicanery, such a knave, so shrewd, cagey, as well as calculating, as diabolical as I am vulpine, as tricky as I am untrustworthy. Well, I told you there were not words invented yet to explain how great my brain is. But let me put it this way. The world is several million years old, and several billion people have at one time or another trod upon it. But I, Vizzini, the Sicilian, am, speaking with pure candor and modesty, the slickest, sleekest, slyest, and wiliest fellow who has yet come down the pike. I really love that the way that William Goldman uses like alliteration, but then sometimes like whatever the opposite of alliteration is, like words that make your mouth work but without being completely impossible, because there's just enough alliteration to make it like flow smoothly. It's just so well written as far as like his choice of words and descriptors. Cunning, crafty, clever, deceit, guile, chicanery, knave, shrewd, cagey. It's like, it's just challenging enough to be fun to read it out loud. So I think that's really cool. I think that's something that I don't do enough of, is read my writing out loud to see how it sounds. Because, well, I mean, I have started doing that a little bit more so recently, but I think in my older stuff, I didn't really read it out loud. Because I didn't really have the intention of, is this maybe going to be read by somebody? But more recently, I've been doing some, like, screenwriting and stuff like that, where it's definitely going to have to be out loud at some point, because it's written for film, or it's written for someone to read it out loud. And so for those projects, I have been doing a little bit more of that. But I think that's a good thing, even when I'm writing like fiction, prose and stuff like that. I think that's a good thing to keep in mind, to be able to just read that out loud and see how it sounds. And if it doesn't sound right, like, pick a different word. The slickest, sleekest, slyest, and wiliest fellow who has yet come down the pike. In that case, said the man in black, I challenge you to a battle of wits. Vizzini had to smile. For the princess. You read my mind. It just seems that way, I told you. It's merely logic and wisdom. To the death. Correct again. I accept, cried Vizzini. Begin the battle. Hi there. Thanks for joining our book club. If you'd like to join the conversation, I would love it if you would leave us a comment. And if you'd like to see more, check out the playlist.